Elypse is a new action platformer that takes clear influence from games such as Hollow Knight, Ori and Celeste. That is quite the stacked lineup and absolutely a high bar to aim for. The question is, can it live up to its idols? Well, that's what we are here to find out. My name's Alex, this is SwitchCorner, and if you enjoy this video, consider subscribing. It helps the channel a huge amount. The story is relatively minimal initially. It starts with a brief description and cutscene detailing this world, and I really like the idea here. That is, every 10 years a sacrifice must be made to protect your people from the abyss. That is a place as worshipped as it is feared. Unfortunately for you, you were chosen this time around. Now you have one chance to escape and return to the world you know if you can find a portal. You'll be accompanied on this journey by a character named Nyx, and he will gradually reveal more details about himself, this world, and the sacrifices made. Gameplay then, and we have a side-scrolling action platformer with some demanding moments and a very slight metroidvania influence. Think some branching pathways and often move requirements that will allow you to progress. No real backtracking however, or massive map to find. Now let's start with the problem immediately today, so this video has a full transparency. I have not beaten the game, I spent 2 hours with it, and on checking on playthroughs online, I am around the midway point of the experience, and even then I've died countless times, so it's definitely not a massive game. The problem is, unfortunately for me, it's performance. It's an unlocked frame rate and I'm getting anywhere from 23 to 40 frames per second. That constant fluctuation is leading to frustration, and it's making an already difficult game more so as the responsiveness of the controls they are impacted. That's no way to play a game that has sequences comparable, as I said, to Ori, Hollow Knight or Celeste, where quick reactions and a smoother frame rate are pretty much key to your success. I don't put a huge focus on frame rate wobbles myself. I know it happens and I can typically push through them, but this one, it has got me. It's also only dropped on the PlayStation 5 and the Switch, so did the PS4 suffer from this same issue? So they went ahead and bypassed it. On the game itself, I'm generally enjoying it. Our character is relatively flexible, and while we possess fast movement and a jump ability, we do quickly inherit a celestial dash and attack ability. Now these allow us to momentarily freeze on the ground or in the air with the hold of a trigger and launch ourselves or an attack in any direction, and the controls, they do generally work well. I've also just unlocked the ability to wall jump, which recharges my dash mid-air, and that's where I've really started to struggle now with the frame rate. It wants me to fire in the air, connect with a wall, and then continue my ascent, and I can get through it, but half the time I feel like I'm battling against the game. As I do progress then, I'm also getting more recharges of each. Now I'm up to 4 air dashes consecutively and 3 arrow attacks. These also put a strain on that frame rate. A dash is required, however, to recharge up the arrow, so you will be flying all over the place. I also really like the skill tree. Early in the game we meet a merchant and I purchased a home base location that I can set up in the world occasionally. Here I can level up my skills, and it seems there are a fair few still to go. Some early examples are actions that recharge faster and a dash that can damage those in your vicinity. This is all done with a currency system where you are collecting the souls of those that have found themselves trapped in the abyss. The system of currency as well I really like, as you will need to part with it wisely. Do you spend it on upgrades, or do you buy something new from the merchant? Most recently, as an example, I skipped an upgrade so I could purchase an item that sucked in enemy souls around me when they were destroyed, meaning I no longer had to do elaborate platforming to reach, let's say, an enemy that was originally attached to the roof. The locations then are changing things up nicely as well. It began with a few spikes and the occasional enemy. Now it's fire pits, elaborate corridors to navigate in the air, bubbles that give you a temporary power boost, and even the occasional boss encounter that tests what you've learnt this far. This all said though, the core design is not perfect either. I can't help but feel the game is, if anything, a little cheap. The enemy creativity this far hasn't really evolved too much, but there are some enemies that fire projectiles that home in on you nearly the second you enter their screen space. Occasionally as well, it simply goes for the idea of overwhelming you with a bigger count of opponents. This proves tough because you are trapped on a single screen typically, and when you use the arrow on the ground it pushes you back quite a bit, and I found often into enemies that are one-hit kills. The design issues do continue unfortunately. Checkpoints go between perfectly spaced and way too far. On more than a few occasions, I had to repeatedly navigate tough locations because there wasn't a checkpoint waiting for me after its completion. Now, that might sound okay and you may simply question my ability there, and I absolutely get that. But the game has this really bad habit. It's a single habit that's constantly copied, and that is there's a ledge that you must drop from. Now, as you've seen, the game is fast, and often these pits unfortunately lead to a moment where you need to make a split-second decision because you are heading, let's say, immediately into spikes or fire pits. So when you do replay it, it's going to be relatively easy to overcome these, just not that first time. And that's what makes it kind of cheap to me. It kills you because it hides what's below off screen, and then the frame rate wobbles kick in at the same time. I also don't feel the controls are perfect, honestly. It is fast, the jump feels a little underpowered, and it's one height only. Also, I'd say the same thing about the dash as well. It's a good idea that could do with a little fine tuning. So far, basically, there's a good game in here, and I would have persevered if it were not for that frame rate. It just feels choppy if I had to describe it, and the higher the difficulty ramps, the more frustrating it becomes, especially in sequences where all of these issues come together. Now, there are some difficulty assists I could turn on, including slowing down the game, unlimited aiming, but I don't want to play the game the unintended way. Visually, I really like the style. I think the Hollow Knight influence is most obvious here, a very gothic, almost style to it all with rock formations and fiery pits. Detail is great as well, with a nice mix of objects in the background and the foreground. Initially, I will say as a warning, this may cause some issues as you figure out what you can and can't walk on, but I feel at this point I've gotten used to it, and it's definitely an impressive style. Animations are particularly nice as well on our character, and I think that's where the Ori influence comes into play, a simple figure, but with a lot of character in those animations. There's also then some nice in-engine cutscenes as well, which I won't spoil, but one issue I did note, the opening cutscene of the game has some unusual visual glitches. It almost looks like screen tearing, but these are very brief. It is a shame though that it's a distraction as it introduces its world. I'm generally impressed by the audio then, honestly, but there's not a huge amount to it. I really like the atmospheric music. There are some mysterious environmental effects that bring each location to life, and I believe some of these are baked into the music as well. And then the attacks, the dashes, they sound powerful. There is no voice acting in this one, but there is a small amount of sound that does accompany the dialogue exchanges, and it adds a sense of almost alien to these characters. Overall, there appears to be a decent game in here, but the frame rate had me walking away. I've had a few games like this recently, and I've either pushed through or walked away and covered briefly on the channel. So today I'm introducing a new score, and that is needs a patch. It's clear the game is not perfect, some cheap elements to its design, but I was having fun and I'd love to experience this game with a locked out frame rate. Even if it's just 30 FPS, I think that would be more than fine. It seems though you can overcome the experience in around 4 hours as well on average. I was at the halfway mark, so I do question as well if the $20 asking price is a little steep. So if I do get word that an update dropped, I will circle back. I do want to check out this game. I want to give it the credit it deserves and give it the coverage it deserves. I also think this game is kind of a prime opportunity for speedrunners. I think they will have a blast with this game if they can stabilize the performance. So are you going to check this one out? Will you push through the frame rate? Let me know in the comments. With that, hit subscribe, join us here for reviews, deals, news and lists daily, and I'll see you all on the next video. Thanks everyone.